Now we move from the cellular level to the tissue level. So individual cells now make up these four main type of animal tissues. Okay, and the best way to understand these tissues is to think of an organ or part of the body with a hollow center in it. Whether it's the stomach or the lungs or the respiratory tract or the reproductive tract or the blood vessels. Let's focus on blood vessel right now. So a blood vessel is a long tube and it's got a hollow center. That hollow center is called the lumen. Okay, when you study cells under a microscope, it's always good to identify which is the luminal side. You know which tissues you're talking about. So the cells that always line the lumen are called epithelial tissue. Okay, so the cells that make up the tissue are called epithelial tissue and epithelial cells. All right, and they have special functions that we'll talk about later in the semester about the way they interact with the stuff that's in the lumen. And then underneath the epithelial cells is a tissue called the connective tissue. And connective tissue kind of holds everything in place. It offers strength, fortification, has a lot of other functions. Again, we'll talk about a little later in the semester. But you're going to have to understand these four tissue types. And then on the opposite side, on the other side of the epithelial tissue from the connective tissue is the muscular tissue. Okay? So we know what muscle tissue is. There's three different types. And like I said, we'll talk about them a little later. But what do? They provide movement and a couple other functions, but mostly movement. And then finally, the last tissue is nervous tissue. Nervous tissue are these blue fibers coming in, and they do what's called innervation. They innervate the muscle tissue and get it to move. So we'll talk about these functions in greater detail later in the semester, but this is an example of the tissue level of biology, going from epithelial to connective to muscle to nervous tissue.